Wow, you guys are really good at that. We should have a joint parent-teen class just so they can see how when I say, all right, that's just my polite way of saying, please be quiet.
I would say after teaching last week, I'd forgotten just how accurate it is when you say words are butt ends.
Wednesday, I'm not kidding. Wednesday nights with the boys is just, it's just different. Wayne is like, you ever want to teach an adult class? Yes, Wednesday nights. Every Wednesday night, ever. So, special prayer for Ken Clark, who's up there tonight with him. He's doing a great service. No, they're great. But Wednesday. Yes, correct. Wednesday nights. That's. So we are coming to the end of this quarter. So we meet tonight. I want to double check this. We'll meet tonight in here, and then we'll have one more week, I think, because the last Wednesday night in February, since it's the Wednesday before Affirming the Faith, they wax the gym floors and a bunch of other things. So we will all meet that last Wednesday night over in the auditorium. So we got 2 more weeks. So what I want to do tonight, I feel like we've talked a lot about what happens in the time we have kids in the home when they are in that 0 to 12th grade range, and what we can do as a family and as a church to help build them up. But at some point, that time comes to an end. And so what I want to do tonight is talk a little bit about that bridge from high school into whatever may come next for our kids. For a lot of them, it's college, but honestly, it seems like more and more we're seeing kids that are just going into the workforce or experiencing different things as they leave school. And so tonight we're going to talk about that bridge, and then in our last week, next week, I want to spend a little bit of time hopefully trying to encourage us, because I do know as we've gone through this, if you are like me, there have been a lot of things that you're like, I don't do that very well, and I don't do that very well. And I certainly don't want this to be a class where we feel like we've just been beating up on ourselves, because being a parent is hard. And being a church that is very focused on passing faith to the next generation, it's hard. It takes work. And as much as I want us to be good at showing grace to our kids when they fail, we got to be good at showing grace to ourselves as well. And so next week, I just want to talk a little bit about that and how we can, come to terms with the fact that we're still human and we still make mistakes. And so tonight, I want to talk about that bridge. I remember a few years ago, it was one of those years where our senior class was really big. I felt like our seniors were especially active, and it was just going to be extra hard as they graduated and kind of went off to the next stage of life. And I remember it was the last area-wide of the summer. Every summer we go to a different area-wide each Monday night throughout the Oklahoma City area. It was the last area-wide. And for this group of seniors, because most of them were leaving the next day to go off to school, this was kind of the end of their time with the youth group. And I remember pulling up like we always do under the overhang on this side by the gym and stopped. And 3 of them sat on the front row of the van, and they just kind of like looked at each other and looked at the van and then looked up at me, and they're like, well, see ya? And I was like, see ya. It felt very anticlimactic. And I could see the look on their face that they realized, like, this is the end of this chapter. I'm not even a parent of a graduating senior yet, and already it's hard. It's hard to watch kids that you care a lot about as they step into the unknown, into whatever may come next. Obviously, we do some things to celebrate our seniors, but usually comes in May and earlier in the summer. And so I just remember sitting there thinking, like, what is this it? Like, just cut ties now, they're off on their own, or what do we do to help as they go forward from here? And so what I want us to spend some time talking about tonight is, how do you find that balance between letting kids go and stretching their wings and experiencing the next part of life without just throwing them in the deep end and hoping for the best, you know? Because the fact of the matter, I mean, it is a biblical truth, kids leave. Eventually, kids leave. Genesis chapter 2, very early on in the story, verse 24, it says, guess what? Man's going to leave his father and his mother, and he's going to go and he's going to join himself to another, and they leave. And so, in a way, as a parent, I feel like you spend 18 years of just preparing for that moment. And even as a church, we prepare our kids for that moment. And so then, sometimes I think we get to that moment, and then it's like, oh no, like this is what we prepared for, but what now? Like, all right, get out of here. We're going to pay attention to these other ones now. And so let's talk a little bit about how we can help build that bridge from the home into that next stage of life. Because people have often said that those first few years out of high school are really an in-between time. Because you haven't quite stepped into full adulthood yet. You're not married yet. You haven't had kids yet. A lot of times you don't have a full-time job. So you're in this weird in-between phase. It's why I loved college. It was all the freedom of being an adult, but I still didn't have any of the responsibilities of being an adult. Mom and dad were still paying the bills, right? I still could call my dad up and be like, hey, I'd really love to go see a movie this weekend, and suddenly $25 was in my bank account. Like, it was freedom without the responsibility. It was wonderful. It was wonderful and extremely dangerous. And that's where a lot of our kids find themselves, in this in-between time. And so what we want to do as we are raising up this next generation is help them build that bridge that goes from high school into adulthood and helps them cross over that weird in-between time where I don't really know who I am and what I'm doing. And so we're going to start like we've done with all these lessons and look at some of the findings that they pulled out of the research that they did, and then try to make some practical applications from that. But number one, some of this obviously touches on what we've already looked at, but they found that most kids do not feel prepared for college. Obviously, we're going to use the term college a lot. That's just for whatever comes next. A lot of kids don't feel prepared for post-high school life. They polled kids, and only 1 in 7 students claimed that they felt very prepared for the next stage of life. What's scary is their research also shows that kids felt like being prepared was very important for them. And so when you find it's super important to be prepared and you don't feel prepared, that's not a good combination there. And so this isn't just a lack of preparedness for college level classes. This is a lack of preparedness for whatever comes next. Building relationships, finding a new church home, getting a job, all those new things that we haven't experienced yet. 6 out of 7 kids said, I wasn't ready. I was not ready for it. And so that's something to keep in mind as we look at some of these other truths. Number 2, they've said that the first 2 weeks of college set the trajectory. In other words, what happens in the first 2 weeks your kids experience that freedom makes a huge difference in where they go from there. And I can tell you from experience, that's what I found. In those first 2 weeks, that's when I kind of built my friend group. That's when I fell into a rhythm of like when I studied. And that's also when I found a lot of people didn't find a rhythm of study. And those are the ones who struggled because for 2 weeks, they were just interested in, oh man, I'm just going to meet as many people as I can and have a great time. And then someone's like, hey, you remember you came here to learn things? And they're like, I am learning things about these people. And they're like, no, you were supposed to be going to classes. And I'm like, oh, right. Those first 2 weeks are super important. And this in this data that they collected, these kids said that within the first 2 weeks of going off to college, that's when they were faced with some of the tough decisions that they had to make. Am I going to hang out with kids that are drinking? How am I going to decide on some of those challenging decisions that college kids face? And for so many of them, within the first 2 weeks, they have already set the trajectory for the rest of their time. Now, that doesn't mean you can't right the ship and get back on track. But I went off to school with 2 cousins. One roomed with me. And so we had a very similar schedule. The other was a girl, and she, within those first 2 weeks, really struggled to find her footing. And she lasted a semester. And I think a big part of it was just she struggled in those early weeks and just didn't know how to recover from that. And so for her, she was like, I just want to go back to what I know, and thought that going home would do that. And again, look, college isn't for everybody. I get that. She turned out probably more normal than I did. So she did great. But it shows how important those first couple of weeks are. And so what we want to do is help set our kids up to succeed in those early weeks so that their trajectory through college is a good one. All right, number 3, we talked about this already, but finding and connecting with a church is difficult. A lot of kids, especially if they grew up in the same church their whole life, really struggle with this. Many students don't even know what they're looking for. I've noticed this with some of our kids when we travel to area wides and stuff. We'll go to a congregation who do something a little differently, and I'm not even talking about things that would make us uncomfortable doctrinally. We'll go to a place where they maybe dim the lights a little bit in the Lord's Supper, and I see the kids turn at me and they're like, "Is this okay?" Like, Jesus had lots of lights on up there in the upper room, so that's natural for kids to see things that are different and look to someone they trust and say, "Is this normal?" And that's great when they've got a youth minister or a parent there with them experiencing it. When they're on their own, all they know is this is different. And frequently for young people, if you see something that's different, what's your assumption? Different is wrong, bad. And so sometimes different is wrong. Sometimes different is just different. And so we need to help our kids when they walk into a church for the first time and see something different. They can go, is that different just different? Or is that different like, no, this is not a place that I should be? But for a lot of kids, they don't know how to do that. They've never been a part of a congregation other than the one they grew up in. And so it's a real challenge for them, especially if they go off somewhere where there's only a few churches in the area and they can't seem to find one that's just like the one they grew up in. That's hard. We're very blessed in Oklahoma City. I feel like wherever you grew up, you can find a church that's pretty similar to how you were raised. But that's not how it is in every place. And so how do we help our kids manage some of that? And so because of this, they said only about 57% of the students that they talked to said they were attending worship at least once a week. Because it's just too hard. It's challenging. I don't want to do it anymore. And that is an added stress on top of number 4. These kids said that managing daily life is a major challenge. I am 37. I've been doing this a bit now. And there are still times where managing daily life is just really hard. And then you think about our kids, and they're going into a time where everything is new. New place, new people, new school, new activities, new freedoms, new responsibilities, and we're just like, good luck. And again, some parents do a really good job of helping them transition. But I know, look, I was the third kid of 5. By the time, look, it was like, Jeremy, do you want us to drive with you? No? All right. Have a good time. Take your brother with you. I'm like, he's got 1 more year of high school. Sorry. I'm like, oh, okay. That's fine. And so if you don't have people that you know and you can trust, maneuvering through those things is really hard. On top of that, look, I don't want this to sound like I'm taking shots at schools, but we live in a time where a lot of schools feel like what they need to do is help give kids a good experience. And what that usually means is we're going to fill your schedule with stuff. Man, I loved my time at OC, but there were intramurals, and there was spring sing, and there was club, and there was the college ministry that I wanted to be a part of. And on top of that, there was, for some reason, a girl who seemed interested in me, and thank you. Appreciate that. All of those things on top of the fact that I'm here to be a student. Or for those kids who are going straight into the workforce, I'm trying to learn how to just have a career, and I've got all these other things piled on top of it. And I understand why schools do that. They want kids to have opportunities to build relationships. It's great. But it's also hard because our kids, I talk to former youth kids all the time. I'm like, how are things going? And you know what they always say? Busy. Busy. A good kind of busy, just busy. And look, I look back on my 4 years in college, and it was busy. It was great. I really did enjoy it. But I'm thankful that there was a quarter I got mono. It forced me to really slow down. I just laid in my bed for 4 weeks, and it was a nice little Sabbath for me, forced upon me. But that's what our kids are going through. And so what do we do to help prepare them for managing daily life? And then the fifth one, the fifth finding that I wanted to just kind of highlight, contact with parents helps kids. Surprise, surprise. I think some parents feel like, I don't want to smother. I want them to have their space. And so we send our kids off to school, and it's like, I'm gonna give them their space, and they'll call me if they need something. Because sometimes we call our kids, and they're like, oh, I don't have time for this. One thing we've talked about in this class is even when our kids act like it's not good for them, sometimes it's good for them. And one thing that they found from the research they did is that kids who maintained contact with their parents regularly had a better chance of holding on to their faith. And not just their parents, but when they had open contact with other adults from their church, it was a good thing for them. Not just the old, are you going to class? Are you meeting any friends? But just, hey, how are things going? Tell me about your experience so far. And then just letting them talk. And so those are 5 things that I thought were interesting. So kind of let's just look here a little bit at the practical from some of this. How do we practically help build this bridge for our kids going into that next season of life? Number 1, I think this is really important. We as parents and as the church have to trust God with our kids. We want to make sure we've done our part and that we've set our kids up for success. But we also have to let God be God. And I think there are times where we feel like it would just be best if we could always be close. And I'll just kind of helicopter, like, what's that sound? Is that a helicopter? No, it's just my mom. She's always nearby. And we want to be able to always know we need to be able to trust that as much as we care about our kids, as much as we want our kids to succeed, God loves our kids even more, and he wants our kids to succeed. And so we need to trust him to work on our kids as well. Even when we're at home and we don't know necessarily what's going on, just trust that he's in control. And that's not the old, I haven't done anything up to this point, and I'm just going to trust that God's going to somehow work a miracle in my kid's life. But it's, I've done my part, and now as they launch away from home, I'm going to trust that God is going to do what he needs to do. Not even as a parent, even as a youth minister, this is something that I've really had to work on. Because we graduate kids, and I'll be honest, I want to be able to text kids every week and just be like, hey, like, how are things going now? Like, is your faith good? Have you found a good church home? And 1, they don't want to hear from me, and that's okay. But 2, like, I need to know that this wasn't about what I did. And even as a parent, it's not just about what I do. God's at work, and I've got to trust that if it was his plan for kids to launch from the home into a new season of life, that he's going to provide them with what they need. And so we can't beat ourselves up. We can't sit around constantly worrying about the decisions our kids are going to make. We have to trust God, all right? So that's first and foremost. That's at the root of all of it. Number two, I think this is really important too. We need to let our kids know our unconditional love. This is, yes, after they go out to school, but this is long before that. We need to work hard at making sure our kids know that we love them no matter what choices they make, no matter how many times they may fail, that we still love them. That doesn't mean that we don't offer corrections or that we don't talk about things that we need to do better. But I want my kids to know that if they mess up and fall short, they can always come talk to Dad. Today, Darcy, this is going to sound like a brag. It's not. I'm pretty sure the entire third grade made honor roll. If in third grade, you just need to be able to tie your shoes, basically, I think. But I got to go up to the school today because Darcy made honor roll, and she was so excited, and I saw her up on stage, and she came back to me at my seat and showed it to me, and she was so proud. And I said, Darcy, I'm very proud of you. She said, aren't you so proud of me that I did this? And I said, I am. And as she's getting ready to go to class, I said, Darcy, I hope you know, even if you didn't make honor roll, your daddy's still proud of you. Man, she just got this big smile. And I'm not always great at that. I think as parents, we want our kids to achieve and do great things. And I do. I want my kids to work hard. I want them to understand the value of working hard at what you do. But I also want my kids to know that if they don't make the honor roll, I still love them. And if they end up not being super, super smart, you got my genes, and that's okay. I love you. So far, it's seeming like Darcy got moms, so she's in luck. But I want my kids to know that I love them because they're my kids. And that way, as they go off to school, because it's not a matter of if our kids are going to fail when they launch into the next season of life. It's when. They may not be major failures, but we know, we as people, we make mistakes. And I want my kids to know that if you make mistakes, if you make decisions that you shouldn't have made, you can call me and you can talk to me and you can call your mom and talk to your mom. But that's something that has to start way before I send them off to school. This can't be a hug, okay, study hard, and I hope you know I love you no matter what. No, that's not really what you taught me in high school. No, I unconditionally. I've already set a standard before them, before that point. And so our kids need to know, no matter what happens, we're going to support them, we're going to love them, we're going to be there. Because too many kids have voiced that they feel like if they made a bad choice, a really bad choice, they couldn't come back to the church for sure. And a lot of them feel like they couldn't even come and talk to mom and dad about it. And I don't ever want my kids to feel that way. Look, I want to set my kids up to make the right choices, certainly. But I also want them to know that when they mess up, when they fall short, or when they spend $200 on a Halloween party when they should have used it to pay off their student loans, that you can call dad and be like, I was not super smart in my decisions. Don't give a 19-year-old $200 and tell him put that in an account. He put it in an account. Walmart's account. And I'll just tell you, it was a great Halloween party. It was really great. There's a brain jello mold, so the people will never forget it. I don't even remember who was there. But if we set this standard that we're going to jump down our kids' throat every time they make a mistake, when they go off to school and they fail the first time, you're not going to be the one that hears from them. They're like, yeah, nope. I'll find somebody else that I can talk to about that. But if they know that no matter what, we're going to be there, that's good for them. Carrie just made me read this book. And I hate when I say I'm reading a book and then I can't ever remember the title or the person who wrote it. But it's about good habits in the household. And he was just talking about how every night before his kids go to bed, he just spends time with each one of them, reminding them, hey, you know I love you, right? And they say, yep. He said, you know when you do good, I love you? Yep. And you know when you do bad, I love you? Yep. He said, from an early age, I want that to be something my kids know, no matter what. But we can't just do it with what we say. We've got to show it as well. So help your kids understand that you love them unconditionally. All right, now let's start stepping on toes. Don't do for your child what they can do for themselves. This one's hard for me because I've got two sweet little daughters, and when they're struggling with anything, I'm like, I'll do it. Dad can come in, be the hero. They're struggling. Let me just do it for them. Kids need to learn how to do stuff and mess up doing stuff. Sometimes I wonder as parents if we step in and do it because we are wanting to help, or if we step in and do it because we're impatient and we just want it done quickly. That's usually my struggle. But what we develop is what we call helicopter parents, who feel like we constantly have to do everything for our kids. And they don't learn how to do anything for themselves. And that's not just like at a young age. As our kids get older, it's important for our kids to learn how to do tough things. Part of the blessing of being one of 5 kids was, and my dad's a preacher, so he's not making tons of money. If I wanted to go out on the weekend and do something fun, I was like, Dad, I could use some money. And he's like, hey, me too. He said, hey, you should get a job. And look, no 16-year-old wants to be told, get a job. I'm like, no. Maybe just like dust something around here and you can slide a 20 my way. What do you think? It was good for me to learn how to earn money. And look, was I always smart with the money I earned? Nope. But I tell you, the 2 years that I worked at Sally's Sunbeams Daycare, character forming. Character forming. I think that's why I can handle Wednesday nights with the middle school boys. Because after a couple summers doing that, you're dead inside. You don't even know. But like that was really good for me, for my dad to say, hey, look, I'll give you some money from time to time, but if you want money, you need to go out and you need to work for it. And hey, Dad, so-and-so, Mom and Dad just brought him a brand new car. And he's like, did you count how many siblings you have? Oh, okay. You're welcome to drive the Bird. The Bird was what we called our old minivan because it sounded like this. Said, or you can sign up, save up and buy your own car. And so I drove the Bird. But again, like that, and look, that's not, I know if my dad could have bought a car for all of his kids, he would have. That's not the point. The point is, it was good for me to have to do some hard things for myself. And when I got off to college, it was easier for me to transition into some of those harder things because I'd already been expected to do a lot of those things. I've talked to kids who go off to college and they've never done anything for themselves. And it is like they've been thrown into the Amazon jungle and they're having to survive with no supplies. What am I going to do? There was no one here to make my dinner tonight. So did you know that you can go to the cafeteria and they serve food? I don't even know where that is. Okay, I don't know how to help you. We need to help our kids learn to try and fail, and that's okay, to fall short, so that when they get to a point where I'm not there to help them, they're like, yeah, no biggie, I've done this before. They can face those struggles and know how to deal with them. So again, this is not one of those right as they go off to school, we try this. This is something we build from early on. Help them learn to work through those things on their own. All right, this next one, we're going to look at a couple different points underneath this, but help prepare your students for the next season of life. And what I mean by that is, I think we do a lot. I can remember when I went off to college, we built the list of like what I need for my dorm and what classes I'm supposed to be taking. And all those things were in order, but then it was like all the like meaningful things in life. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about how I'm going to provide for myself. That's fine. I'll figure that one out. I've got ramen noodles in the apartment, I'll be fine. How are you going to manage time and manage money and build friendships? Those are the conversations I needed to have that would help prepare me for that next season of life. And so when I say help prepare students for the next season of life, here's a couple examples of what I mean. Number one, Matt Tyson, I think it was, came up and talked to me about this last week. He said when he went off to school, one of the things that helped him a lot, and if somebody else in here, you were the one that told me this, you can correct me and say, that's not Matt's idea. You're stealing that. He said his parents went with him to a couple of churches in the area where he was going to school. And rather than just saying, hey, go find a church home, they went with him. And he said that was huge because, one, there was some accountability. He knew mom and dad are coming with me, so I've got to give these churches a fair chance. But also he said the things that I probably would have been unsure of on my own, I had someone to talk to about and say, hey, that was kind of weird, right? And like, yeah, that was kind of weird. Or, hey, I really liked the way he said that. That's right. Yeah, that's good. I've heard about a lot of parents that do this. Ken and Terea, when Jackson went off to OU, they're like, hey, let's go down and check out Westside. And they went down with him and met the preacher and met the college minister. Those are really healthy things to do. There's still the freedom of letting my kid go off and, hey, you choose the church. But we can kind of walk with them through that. Now, look, I know some of your kids might be like, no, I don't need you. I don't need you to hold my hand. That's fine. Say, I'll sit on the other side of the auditorium. You can pretend you don't know me. But at least you have someone to compare notes with when it's all said and done. You can say, hey, this doesn't just apply to when we're going off to school somewhere. It's not terrible to visit other churches sometimes with your kids, and they get an opportunity to see what other church families look like. When my dad was in preaching school in Denver during the summers, we would travel and visit some of the churches that supported my dad, and they were very different. And I can remember sitting and riding in the car afterwards and talking about different stuff, and that was really healthy for me to be able to go somewhere with my family, experience church in a slightly different way. Obviously, my dad's in school at Bear Valley, so we weren't going to, he's being supported by these churches, so they were all pretty close to what I was used to. But every once in a while, you'd go into a church and you're like, that made me a little uncomfortable, and you could talk about it. And did it make me uncomfortable because I'm just not used to it? Or did it make me uncomfortable because it goes against what I believe? And those are really important conversations for our kids to have. We go to area wides sometimes where we walk away and I talk to the kids about, hey, that was a little uncomfortable, right? Yeah, it was. Why did that make you uncomfortable? And we can talk about it. And I've talked to parents who have conversations with their kids. And look, I'm not just going to take our kids to every church in town and just be like, hey, this is going to be a good learning experience for us. But it is healthy for our kids to experience things and get to talk with us about them, rather than just saying, hey, good luck out there, visit some different churches and find something that works for you. Walk with them through that part of the journey. Help them out. Talk to your child about life after high school. Not just, did you sign up for your classes? Time and money management were the two things that were listed by the most kids as things that they felt completely unprepared for. And go ahead and, I didn't take that poll, but put me down for those. Because when I was in high school, my time and my money was managed. Just wasn't by me, right? It was somebody else. And I can remember a guy that I sat next to in one of my Bible classes talking to me about his budget. He said, yeah, and in my monthly budget. And I was like, what? He's like, your monthly budget? Yeah, no, totally. And I just remember thinking oh yeah, I'm supposed to kind of be like an adult now. But truthfully, I just hadn't had those kind of conversations. Or honestly, I probably had, but I just wasn't listening. And so those are the kinds of things we should be talking to our kids about. Hey, how are you going to prepare for meeting new people? And what do you think it's going to be like being a part of a new church home? What things are you worried about? What things are you excited about? Those are good conversations. Again, your kid might not want to have those conversations with you. I know some seniors especially, when you start talking to them, they're like, no, I don't want to talk about it. I get it. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit of anxiety. Sometimes maybe it's them feeling like you're trying to like manipulate them. It's just open conversations. We've talked before about tricking your kids into conversations. That's fine too. Just pretend you're talking about something else, and then boom, all of a sudden you've tricked them, and you're talking about life after high school. They won't even know it hit them, all right? So, but have those conversations. Both like physical stuff, but also spiritual conversations. What have you done to help set yourself up for living on your own? Spiritual disciplines, things like that. And then as a church family, finding ways to support that and reinforce what's being done at home. I've talked with some of our youth deacons about having a class in the summers before our seniors graduate where we can just talk about things that they are still wondering about. I think that's good. But that doesn't have to be a class. That can also be a conversation that takes place around a dinner table at home. It's good for our kids. All right, this next one, I did not do this. It would have helped me a lot. They talked about this idea of creating a 2-week plan. So if those first 2 weeks that your kids leave and go off to college are super important, then it's good to have some kind of a plan. Now, things are flexible. You get off to college and it's not at all what you were expecting. And so you may have to adjust, but when are you going to study? And how much time are you going to set aside for recreation? That's probably important to have because a lot of kids are like, well, life is the recreation part, and I'm just going to sprinkle some study in from time to time. What should I do about money and things? And for those first 2 weeks, have a plan so that those first 2 weeks can go well and our trajectory is set up for success. Be flexible, adjust as you need. But if our kids have a plan going into it, they're going to feel better. They're going to feel more confident in what they do. And then hopefully from there, they'll have more success as well. So think about sitting down and just talking through those first 2 weeks. Where are you going to go to church that first Sunday? What about Wednesday night? Are you going to go to the same place, or are you going to try to visit somewhere else? Encourage those first couple weeks, and every time the church is getting together, be there. Because if you build that into your schedule early on, you don't get to a point where you're like, well, I already kind of like figured out my schedule, and it doesn't really leave time open for those things. If I've already built those into my schedule from the beginning, it's a piece of cake moving forward. So have them kind of create a 2-week plan. Tell them, say, hey, why don't you build it? And then I'll take a look at it and maybe throw some ideas your way. But help them have a plan so they can have a successful first 2 weeks. And then encourage them to think about their spiritual life. Again, I've mentioned this, but I love this theme that we're doing right now, the idea of spiritual disciplines and our faith being more than just what we do on Sundays. Spiritual disciplines are so important for young people, and unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of young people who are doing it. They may read their Bible a little bit each day, and they may pray some, but for the most part, there's no real depth to their spiritual walk. And start asking questions that, hey, what are you going to do to help your spiritual life thrive when you go off to college? Those are good conversations to have with them. And then finally, number 5, find a balance between giving them space and staying in touch. It's a hard balance. We want our kids to have some time to experience life on their own to some degree and to stretch their legs and feel like mom and dad aren't breathing down my neck. But my question is like, what changed while they were sleeping? That they went to bed in your home, a child, then they just woke up, and because they're driving to college, now they're an adult. Unless they went to the Zoltar machine and had a big experience where, look, it's the Tom Hanks film. They didn't grow up overnight, right? But unfortunately, often that's how we treat it. It's like, well, yesterday they were a kid, now they're in college, so bye. Find that balance. Give them some freedom. Give them a little bit of rope, but make sure you know what's going on. Call them up. look, I was busy when I went to school, but I always appreciated when my mom or dad called. I'd answer the phone, it was my mom or dad, and it just felt like an anchor. It's like no matter how crazy things were going on, it would just like pull me back and be like, like stability. I remember this. It's a calming presence. And look, we didn't always talk for hours and hours. I've never talked for a long time on the phone. Sorry, Carrie. It's just not my thing. I'm a face-to-face guy, I guess, which is unfortunate because this is the face I got. But it was good for me to talk. And my dad say, hey, things going okay? Hey, things are going all right. My dad was the very just like, hey, good, nice to hear from you. My mom would be the, hey, what's it like where you've been going to church? Are you meeting new friends? That was really good for me. And despite what we may think our kids feel, the research says that's important. Our kids need to hear from us. And for those of you who don't have kids, so we've been talking about mentoring and building relationships, and then those kids go off to college, don't feel like you can't maintain contact. Again, like a parent, we want to give them their space and not feel like everyone back home is just knocking on their door constantly. But especially early on, like I want our kids to know, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. I try my best after our seniors graduate to sometime within that first year, just get together with each of them at some point, even if it's just for coffee, and just say like, how's it going? Because I want them to know like I didn't forget about you. Even though you're not in my youth group anymore, like we still care about you and want to know what's going on. But I also want them to know like I want you to have your space. I'm not your youth minister anymore, and so I want you to be able to live your life. There is a balance to that, and it's sometimes hard to strike a balance, especially if you feel like you tend to be a little bit of a helicopter parent. It's hard to set them free and let them do their thing. And for some of you, it's the opposite. You're like, oh no, sayonara, see you at Christmas. Check in with them. Make sure things are going okay. Have good conversations. We don't want our kids to feel smothered, but we do want them to feel loved and cared about, and that's a balance. All right. Thanks for being here tonight. We got one more week, and then they're sending me back up there. For reals, thank you for being here, guys. Appreciate it.
Giving me a lot of hope for next week.
No. That's a different group.
Yeah.